The crowd of reporters buzzed with a nervous energy, their cameras flashing like lightning in the cavernous ballroom. My brother, Leo, stood on a stage bathed in a spotlight, his smile as wide as the podium he stood behind. He tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the room. "I'm incredibly proud," he began, "to announce the sale of Ares Enterprises to the multinational conglomerate Sterling Global." A cheer went up from his corporate cronies, but I stood in the back of the room, my heart a lead weight in my chest, a small, cold smile on my face. I am Isabelle, and I was about to watch my family's legacy be dismantled. For my whole life, I was Leo's shadow. He was the golden boy, the charismatic heir who played quarterback in high school and charmed the pants off of our father's business partners. I was the quiet, nerdy one who sat in the corner, devouring business journals and balance sheets. "Leo has the vision," my father would say. "Isabelle, you have a good head for numbers, but that's all. The company is in good hands with your brother." Those words, like so many others, were a constant reminder of my place in the family. A seat at the table, but with a cracked glass and a broken fork. What they didn't know was that my quiet observation was a form of reconnaissance. I had watched for years as Leo's, visionary, projects tanked, and as his reckless spending put our family's company on the brink. I tried to warn my father, but he'd only shake his head. "Don't bother your brother with your silly little worries, Isabelle. He's a man of the world." Leo's smug laughter would follow. Now the sale was finalized, and our family legacy was about to be nothing more than a footnote in corporate history. As the news broke, I saw Leo's wife, Clara, in the front row, a look of pure triumph on her face. Her designer purse probably contained the first of the checks. I knew I had to do something, and I was just about to. But what would you do in my position? Would you stand by and watch your family's legacy be dismantled, or would you fight back against the betrayal that has been building your entire life? Like and subscribe to join me on this journey and find out what happened next. The roar of applause for Leo was a deafening sound. A sound that felt less like a celebration and more like a final nail in the coffin of my family's history. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a perfect mask of neutrality, a skill I'd honed over 3 decades of being invisible. The press conference was a spectacle, an elaborate show orchestrated by my brother, Leo, to cement his place as the family's savior. "Ares Enterprises was a dinosaur," he said with a grand gesture, his voice booming with fake sincerity. "It needed to adapt or die. I chose to save it, to make sure its legacy lives on as part of something bigger, stronger." The cameras flashed, a strobe light of approval that followed his every move. I watched it all from the back of the room, standing beside Mr. Henderson, my father's old, long-retired lawyer. He had known me since I was a child. He looked haggard, his face pale with a mix of shame and sorrow. "I tried to talk to him," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I told him this was a terrible mistake. Your father would have never wanted this. I didn't need him to tell me. I'd seen the signs for years. My father, a man who saw the world in black and white ledgers, had always been so blind when it came to his only son. Leo was the future, a self-fulfilling prophecy my father had always believed in. I was an afterthought, a sideline observer. When I was 10, I presented my father with a detailed business plan for a lemonade stand, complete with a market analysis of our neighborhood. He had laughed, ruffling my hair. "That's cute, Isabelle. Now go ask Leo if he needs help with his science project." Leo had gotten an A on that project, and I had gotten a lecture on how to be a supportive sister from my mother. The memories, sharp and painful, were a bitter counterpoint to the celebratory champagne being passed around. My mother, Clara, floated through the crowd, a vision of polished elegance in a pearl necklace and a tight smile. She caught my eye and gestured with her head for me to come to her. I reluctantly followed, weaving through the press and the eager businessmen. "Isabelle," she said, her voice a low, warning hiss as soon as I was close enough. "Don't you dare make a scene. This is Leo's day. You'll be in the way." Her words were like a familiar song, a constant refrain since childhood. I was never a person to her, I was a problem to be managed. I'm not going to cause a scene, I replied, my voice calm. I just want to congratulate my brother. Leo, spotting me, strode over with a forced smile, putting a hand on my shoulder in a public display of affection. Isabelle, I'm so glad you could make it, he said, the name sounding foreign on his tongue. You should be proud, too. This sale will be a fantastic new beginning for us all. He didn't mean it. His eyes were cold, and I could feel the tension in his hand. I'm proud of my brother for making such a visionary move, I said, looking him dead in the eyes, my voice filled with a double meaning that only he would understand. He laughed it off, pretending not to notice. See, she gets it, he said to the reporter next to him. Some people can see the big picture. The reporter nodded, scribbling in his notebook. I felt a surge of rage, cold and clean, washing over me. They had no idea what was coming next. The papers he had signed, the speeches he had made, they were all based on a lie. He thought he was dismantling the company, but I was about to reveal that he was only setting the stage for his own downfall. That evening, I was sitting alone in my apartment, a quiet, sterile place filled with nothing but the necessities, a reflection of the life I had chosen to live after leaving my family home. The front door buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson, the old lawyer. He looked even more distraught than he had at the press conference, clutching a worn leather briefcase to his chest. Isabelle, I have to talk to you, he said, his voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. It's about your father. I let him inside, and he sat on my sofa, the briefcase still clutched tightly in his hands. Your father knew, he said, leaning forward. He knew Leo was a liability. He told me so many times. But he couldn't bring himself to do what was right. He couldn't risk a public family feud, so he did something else. Something private. He opened the briefcase and slid a thick manila envelope across the coffee table. This is a map, Isabelle, not a physical map, but a financial one. A map to a labyrinth of shell companies, hidden assets, and liabilities that Leo doesn't even know exist. I opened the envelope, my hands trembling as I pulled out a stack of documents. They were legal papers, financial records, and a series of encrypted drives, all meticulously labeled in my father's precise handwriting. There was a letter on top, addressed to me. My dearest Isabelle, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. It also means that Leo has made a mistake. He has fallen for the old proverb, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I tried to tell him that a company's strength isn't just in its profits, but in its ability to withstand the storm. He never listened. He only cared about the easy way out. My father's letter went on to detail a complex plan he had put in motion, a series of financial maneuvers designed to protect the company from Leo's recklessness. He had created a series of small, failing subsidiaries and taken out massive loans to prop them up, a fact that was hidden from the public eye. He had then transferred the debt from the main company to these subsidiaries, a move that would have been a catastrophic mistake for any company. But for my father, it was a carefully calculated risk. I knew that if Leo ever tried to sell the company, he would only be selling the profitable parts, leaving behind a mountain of debt, the letter continued. He wouldn't even know it existed. The money from the sale would be his, but the debt would be left for the new owners to deal with. And that's where you come in. You have a chance to not only get the company back, but also to teach your brother a lesson he'll never forget. You have to find a way to get the debt back into the family. That's your job, my dear. I looked up at Mr. Henderson, my mind reeling. But how? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He's already sold the company. The money is gone. The debt is Sterling Global's problem now, not ours. Not necessarily, Mr. Henderson said with a sad smile. Your father, bless his soul, was a genius. He created a way for you to buy back the debt without anyone knowing. It's all in these documents. He knew you'd be able to figure it all out, and he was right. You have a gift for numbers, Isabelle. You always have. His words were a balm to the wound my mother and brother had inflicted. I had never felt so seen, so understood in my entire life. My father had seen my quiet strength, my careful observation, and he had trusted me with his legacy. This wasn't about revenge, it was about honoring his final wish. It was about righting a wrong that had been building for decades. I had a purpose now, a clear path forward. I would get the company back, and I would make sure Leo never got away with what he had done. The next 6 months of my life became a blur of spreadsheets, legal documents, and late-night phone calls. I was operating out of my small, sterile apartment, a silent, solitary army of one. The documents Mr. Henderson had given me were a roadmap to a financial war zone, a complex web of shell corporations and hidden liabilities that Leo, in his arrogance, had completely overlooked. He was too busy reveling in his newfound wealth and celebrity to notice the ghost in the machine. I had formed a new company, a single-person LLC I had named Nexus Ventures. It was a nondescript name, designed to fly under the radar. My first move was to quietly acquire the subsidiaries my father had set up. These were small, failing businesses that were so far gone, no one would even look at them twice. They were a hot potato of a business, a financial black hole. But to me, they were the key to my father's plan. I used the money from my personal savings, money I had been carefully squirreling away for years, to purchase them, one by one. I paid a fraction of their value, and the sellers were so happy to be rid of them that they never even asked questions. I then hired a team of freelance consultants, each one a specialist in their own field, a tax accountant, a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, and a corporate ghostwriter. And I managed them all remotely, making sure they never knew who their true client was. My days were filled with meetings with bankers, lawyers, and financiers, all of whom saw me as nothing more than a small-time investor. They never once suspected my true intentions. My phone was my only companion, the only link to the outside world. I lived and breathed this plan, fueled by a single-minded determination that had been a part of me for my entire life. I was not just buying debt. I was buying time. I was buying my father's legacy back, piece by piece. Meanwhile, Leo was living the high life. He and his wife, Clara, were a constant presence in the media, a never-ending stream of photos from exotic vacations, celebrity parties, and lavish dinners. He had his 15 minutes of fame, and he was milking it for all it was worth. He had no idea that while he was busy collecting praise, I was busy collecting his debt. One afternoon, I was on a conference call with a bank executive, a man named Thomas who had once been an intern at Ares Enterprises. I knew he was a man of integrity, and I knew I could trust him. I laid out my plan, and he listened patiently, his silence a testament to his surprise. "Isabelle," he said finally, this is genius. Your father was a master. He knew exactly what he was doing." His words were a balm to my soul. I had spent so long being told that my ideas were silly or not for a girl. But Thomas saw the genius in my plan. He saw the fire in my eyes. He saw the strength I had been hiding for so long. "I need your help," I said, my voice filled with a quiet urgency. "I need you to help me acquire the rest of the debt. I can't do this alone." He didn't hesitate. He agreed to help, and in the weeks that followed, he became my secret weapon, helping me to navigate the complex world of corporate finance and acquire the last of the debt from Sterling Global. They were so busy counting their millions that they never even looked at the fine print. They never saw the mountain of debt they had just acquired, and they never saw the ghost in the machine who was about to turn their victory into a nightmare. They had no idea that they had just given me the final piece of the puzzle, the one I needed to finally bring Leo down. I had the power now, the proof, and the righteous fury to finally expose him for who he was, a fraud, a liar, and a thief. The first ripple of chaos came in the form of an anonymous press release, a carefully worded document that I had crafted over several sleepless nights. It was sent to a small-time investigative journalist I had been following for years, a man named Ben who had a reputation for chasing stories no one else would touch. The release was simple, yet devastating. It contained a single line of text. "Ares Enterprises' sale to Sterling Global is a financial fraud, and the company is saddled with $1 billion of unreported debt. The journalist, intrigued, began to dig. He didn't have to look far. The documents Mr. Henderson had given me were all public record, hidden in plain sight, and I had simply given him the key to the lock. The story broke the next day, a small blurb buried deep within the business section of a minor online publication. But it was enough. The article was picked up by other news outlets, and within a matter of hours, it was a viral sensation. The public's response was swift and brutal. People who had once praised Leo for his visionary move were now calling him a con man, a liar, and a fraud. His carefully constructed reputation, the one he had spent a lifetime building, was crumbling brick by brick. His social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. His corporate allies began to distance themselves, and the calls for a public investigation began to mount. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my apartment, a quiet, satisfied smile on my face. The chaos I had sown was a beautiful thing, a symphony of destruction that was a direct result of my careful, meticulous planning. My revenge was not about anger. It was about precision. It was about a lifetime of being overlooked and dismissed, and I was about to make them all see me. The next day, a private investigator from Sterling Global knocked on my door. He was a tall, imposing man with a cold, professional demeanor. "Mrs. Isabelle," he said, his voice a low, rumbling growl. "We have reason to believe that you are the source of the recent leaks. We have a cease and desist order for you, and we will not hesitate to file a lawsuit if you continue to meddle in our affairs." I looked at him, my face a perfect mask of calm. "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my voice as calm as a summer breeze. "I'm just a small-time investor. I have no interest in your corporate dealings." He scoffed, his eyes filled with a mixture of contempt and disbelief. He had no idea that he was looking at the woman who was about to bring his entire company to its knees. I closed the door on him, a small, triumphant smile on my face. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "You did this, didn't you?" a familiar voice said. It was Leo. "You're trying to ruin me." His voice was a blend of fury and panic. "I don't know what you're talking about, Leo," I replied, my voice sweet as honey. "I'm just a small-time investor. You know that. I'm just watching all of this unfold from the sidelines, just like I always have." He hung up, but I knew he would be back. I had just dropped a bombshell on his perfect little world, and he was about to feel the full force of my revenge. He had no idea that this was just the beginning. I had the power now, the proof, and the righteous fury to finally expose him for who he was, a fraud, a liar, and a thief. The courtroom was a sterile, unforgiving place, filled with the hushed whispers of lawyers and the nervous fidgeting of my family. Leo and his lawyers sat across from me, their faces a mask of manufactured outrage. My lawyer, a brilliant, no-nonsense woman named Stacy, had her hands full, trying to navigate the complex legal waters of my case. "We will prove that Miss Isabelle is a disgruntled family member," Leo's lawyer, a slick, self-important man named Mr. Thompson, said, his voice filled with condescension. "She is a woman who, in her jealousy, has fabricated these lies in an attempt to ruin her brother's good name and steal his rightful inheritance." My revenge was not just about the money, it was about the truth. It was about exposing Leo's greed and his complete disregard for our family's legacy. It was about showing the world that he was nothing more than a shallow, self-serving fraud. When I took the stand, I felt a strange sense of calm. I was finally getting my chance to tell my side of the story, to lay out the decades of neglect and dismissal I had endured. I spoke with a quiet, unwavering confidence, my voice steady and clear. I told the court about the lemonade stand, about my father's dismissal of my business acumen, and about the years I had spent as a ghost in my own family. I held nothing back. I told them about my father's second will, the one that stipulated that if Leo ever sold the company without my consent, all the proceeds would be donated to charity. I told them about the years I had spent quietly acquiring the company's debt, about the sleepless nights I had spent poring over documents, and about the single-minded determination that had fueled my journey. "Why?" Mr. Thompson asked, his voice dripping with venom. "Why would you do all of this? Was it for money? Was it for revenge?" I looked him in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "It was for my father," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "He trusted me. He saw something in me that no one else did. He trusted me with his legacy, and I was not going to let him down." I looked at Leo, his face a mask of shame and fury. He had nothing left to lose, and I had everything to gain. The courtroom was silent. The sound of a pin dropping could be heard. The judge, a stoic woman with a kind but stern face, looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of respect and understanding. She had seen countless cases of family betrayal, but she had never seen one with such a meticulously executed plan of revenge. Stacy then presented the documents, one by one. The debt for equity swaps, the shell companies, and the trust documents. It was an ironclad fortress of documentation, a testament to my careful, methodical planning. Mr. Thompson sputtered, his face red with frustration, but he had no defense. He had no rebuttal. He had been outmaneuvered by a woman he had dismissed as a disgruntled family member. He had no idea that I was the one holding all the cards. He had no idea that I was about to bring his entire world crashing down. The courtroom was filled with a sense of quiet anticipation. Everyone knew that the final blow was about to be struck, and I was the one who was about to strike it. The judge cleared her throat, and everyone waited with bated breath to hear her final verdict. Just as the judge was about to issue a verdict, a sudden commotion erupted in the courtroom. A man in a simple business suit, with a briefcase clutched in his hand, walked towards the stand. It was a man I had never seen before. "Your Honor," he said, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. "My name is Arthur. I was my father's personal assistant for over 20 years, and I have something that I believe is of great importance to this case." He then turned to me, his eyes filled with a sad, sympathetic look. "Your father, he was a good man, Miss Isabelle. He was proud of you. He knew you would do the right thing." My heart hammered in my chest. I had no idea who this man was or what he had to say, but I knew that whatever it was going to be big. Arthur then proceeded to tell a story that I had never heard before. He told the court that he had been in charge of organizing my father's most important documents, and that he had been given strict instructions to keep a particular envelope a secret. He had never been told what was inside, only that he should never reveal its contents unless a family member was in dire need of legal protection. He told me that if anything ever happened to the company, or if a family member was ever accused of wrongdoing, I should open the envelope and reveal its contents. Arthur said, his voice filled with a quiet sense of duty. He told me that it contained the truth, the one he was too afraid to reveal while he was alive. My mind was racing. My father had a secret so big that he had to hire an outsider to keep it hidden. Arthur then opened the envelope and took out a single piece of paper. It was a handwritten note from my father, with a date and a signature at the bottom. The note read, "To my dearest Isabelle, I am writing this as a final testimony to my love for you and my faith in your abilities. I know that your brother, Leo, will one day try to sell our company, and I want you to know that I have a plan to stop him. I have a secret will, one that is not filed with the county. It stipulates that if Leo ever sells the company without your consent, all of the proceeds from the sale will be donated to charity. I want you to know that I did this for you. I did this because you are the only one I trust to carry on my legacy. You are the only one who has the heart, the intelligence, and the courage to make it happen." The courtroom was silent. No one made a sound. I looked at Leo, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. He had no idea. He had no idea that our father had a secret will. He had no idea that he had just signed away his entire inheritance. My lawyer, Stacy, looked at me, a triumphant smile on her face. "Your Honor," she said, her voice filled with a quiet sense of victory. "We have just heard the truth. We have heard the truth that my client has been trying to tell you for months. We have heard that my client's brother, Leo, is not the man he pretends to be. We have heard that he is a liar, a fraud, and a thief. We have heard that my client's father, a man who has been slandered and slandered in this courtroom, was not the man he was painted to be. He was a good man, a wise man, and a man who knew that his daughter, not his son, was the only one who had the heart, the intelligence, and the courage to carry on his legacy. I have no more questions. The judge nodded, her eyes filled with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The truth had finally come out, and I was the one who had brought it to light. The judge, a woman who had seen countless family disputes, looked at Leo, her face a mask of disappointment. "Mr. Leo," she said, her voice filled with a quiet sense of finality. "Your brother, a man who you have slandered and slandered in this courtroom, has proven to be a man of integrity. He has proven to be a man who, in his quiet, unassuming way, has been working to preserve his father's legacy, while you have been working to destroy it. You have been found guilty of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. You have been ordered to pay back the full amount of the sale, with interest, and all of your assets, including your new yacht and mansion, are to be liquidated. You are to have no contact with your sister, Isabelle, and you are to never again use the family name for financial gain. You are to be forever known as a man who, in his greed and arrogance, destroyed his family's legacy and ruined his own life." I watched as Leo's face crumpled, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on his face. He had no idea. He had no idea that his entire life, the one he had spent a lifetime building on a foundation of lies and deceit, was about to come crashing down. He had no idea that his sister, the woman he had always dismissed as a quiet, unassuming person, was about to become his greatest enemy. He had no idea that his sister, the woman he had always seen as a ghost in his own life, was about to become his greatest source of pain. I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, a feeling of triumph that I had never felt before. I had won. I had won the battle I had been fighting for my entire life. I had won against my brother, my mother, and my father's ghost. I had won against a lifetime of being overlooked and dismissed. I had won against the shame, the guilt, and the pain that had been a part of my life for so long. My mother, Clara, looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. She had no idea. She had no idea that her son's greed and arrogance would one day lead to his downfall. She had no idea that her daughter, the woman she had always dismissed as a quiet, unassuming person, was about to become her greatest source of pride. She had no idea that her daughter, the woman she had always seen as a ghost in her own life, was about to become her greatest source of joy. I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, a feeling of triumph that I had never felt before. I had won. I had won the battle I had been fighting for my entire life. I had won against my brother, my mother, and my father's ghost. I had won against a lifetime of being overlooked and dismissed. I had won against the shame, the guilt, and the pain that had been a part of my life for so long. The courtroom was silent. The sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Everyone had a face of shock and disbelief. They had never seen a family feud like this one. They had never seen a woman who, in her quiet, unassuming way, had been working to preserve her father's legacy, while her brother had been working to destroy it. They had never seen a woman who had, in her quiet, unassuming way, become a force of nature. They had never seen a woman who had, in her quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. They had never seen a woman who had, in her quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. They had never seen a woman who had, in her quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. The weeks that followed the court case were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and media interviews. I was now the CEO of Aries Enterprises, and I had a mission: to restore my family's legacy and to make sure that my father's vision lived on. I was no longer the quiet, unassuming person I had been for so long. I was a force of nature, a woman who had, in her quiet, unassuming way, become a force of nature. I had a clear vision for the future of the company, and I had the drive, the ambition, and the intelligence to make it happen. I was no longer the ghost in my own family. I was the one who had, in her quiet, unassuming way, become a force of nature. I was the one who had, in her quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I met with the employees, the people who had been a part of my father's life for so long. They were a mixture of shock and relief, and they were all so happy to see me. They had been afraid that the company was going to be destroyed, but I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. The years that followed were a testament to my success. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. I had, in my quiet, unassuming way, become a woman who was a force of nature. Have you ever experienced a similar situation or felt the same way? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched something in you, make sure to subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to hear that the most powerful revenge is building a life they never thought you could have. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes, the greatest act of love is also the most powerful act of self-preservation.